Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Today's guest is Zach Brittle, who is a couples therapist. I figured it would be great to have him on as I hear from so many of you that parenting is the biggest source of conflict in relationships. I asked him about navigating 2 main issues that come up over and over again in my coaching and my community. What do you do when you disagree about parenting, and what do you do when one parent is highly reactive? At the start of the interview, as we were speaking, Zach said something about how kids need boundaries and consequences. I didn't challenge him on this, although you know I feel strongly about consequences and that we have a lot of concern that boundaries in parenting are often overused. However, as the interview progressed, it became clear that he and I weren't as far apart as I originally thought. I didn't challenge him early on because I didn't want to derail the conversation about how to navigate challenges as a couple. I'm so glad I held my tongue, which y'all might guess is hard for me to do. This conversation ended up being a great example of the kind of conversations we need to be having, both on the micro and the macro level. Conversations where we listen to each other and try to find common ground, whether it's our partner or anyone with whom we have conflict. If you're curious what I mean about boundaries are overused, you might want to check out the podcast that Corey and I did about limits. We'll link to that in the show notes. If you find this episode useful, share it with a friend and leave us a rating and review on your podcast player app. We really appreciate your help in spreading the word. We've added sponsors to our podcast so we can keep making this podcast and our other free content to support families on their peaceful parenting journey. If you would like to listen to the podcast ad-free, or even if you'd just like to support our work and know you're helping us educate and support the word about peaceful parenting, you can become a supporter on Substack. For the cost of a fancy coffee, you can get the podcast ad-free as well as access to a monthly Ask Me Anything session where I answer your questions and support you. I know there are folks I support on Substack because I believe in the work they're doing and I want to be part of making their work possible and more accessible. I really hope you'll choose to support us. Go to sarahrosensweet.substack.com or just search up my name and Substack and you'll find it. This podcast is brought to you by Yoto. Yoto is a screen-free audio player that lets your kids listen to audiobooks, music, podcasts, and more without screens and without being connected to the internet. No one listening and no one watching them. They can't go where you don't want them to go in the wild west of the internet, and they aren't watching screens. But they are being entertained or kept company with audio that you can buy from Yoto or create yourself on one of their blank cards. Books, podcasts, stories, or music, it's up to you and your kids. Corey loves the Yoto player and her kids love it even more. I wish it was around when my kids were little. To learn more about the Yoto player, go to reimaginepeacefulparenting.com/Yoto. This podcast is brought to you by the Peaceful Parenting Membership. For a low monthly subscription cost, you get direct access to me and twice weekly office hours drop-in group coaching, a library of peaceful parenting lessons on demand, a private community of parents who get it and are on this journey with you, plus guest expert sessions and monthly trainings on a theme, plus access to the past 6 years of materials inside our membership library. But why take my word for it? Here's what one of our members had to say. I had my husband watch one of your videos after a battle that he had with my daughter. He agrees with peaceful parenting in principle, but doesn't want to read about it. He just wants me to give him the Cliff's Notes versions of the principles. The video was incredibly helpful for him to understand some of the ways he can change his approach when he gets triggered and wants to yell or give consequences. I've seen him really try not to yell and use a calmer approach in his frustrating interactions with our kids the past couple of days. To learn more about the Peaceful Parenting Membership, visit reimaginepeacefulparenting.com/membership. Remember, for an ad-free version of this podcast, become our supporter on Substack. Search up Sarah Rosensweet and Substack and you'll find us. Now, our feature presentation. Let's meet Zach. Hey, Zach, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you because this is what we're going to be talking about today is something that comes up so often in my coaching with parents and also in our membership community and in our different work that I do with parents. And that is the question of our relationships with our partners. So
Hmm.
before we jump into it, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Zach. I'm a couples therapist in Seattle, Washington, where I live with my wife, Rebecca. A couple weeks ago, we just celebrated our 28th wedding anniversary, I think. I think it was 28. You sort of forget numbers, I guess, when you get this old. But our thing is that we like to say we've been happily married for 25 out of 28 years
That's pretty
because
good.
we've had three significant challenging periods that we've weathered, including parenting challenges with our two daughters. They are 18 and 22. They both just graduated, one from high school, one from college. So we're in this wild transition phase between like being parents and then kind of retiring that role and trying to figure out what new role we're going to have. But my professionally, I'm a couples therapist. I do like about 95% of my practice is couples. I see very few individuals. I'm just not that good at it. I don't like it. And I tell my clients that I'm like, I'm not your guy for individual therapy. So, but I've been working with couples for, I don't know, maybe 20 years and I really love it. It's a new mystery every time. And it's like, how do I solve this mystery? So that's what I do. And then for fun, I swim. This morning I already swam 2 miles, which is a little quirky thing about me is every year in the summer, I try to swim a marathon every month. So that's 26.2 miles in June, July, and August. So I did June, I did July, and now I'm halfway through August and I'm just churning out my yards to try and get my third marathon done for the summer.
That's a lot of swimming.
Yeah. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, man, I gotta keep going. I will not give up because I have to check my box."
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and I are in the same space in life with the children growing up and navigating that sort of new phase of the relationship with our partners. And my husband and I have found going to music festivals together has been our
Oh,
thing
yeah.
that we've really.
But we're looking for ways to kind of like, I have couples come into my practice, and when they're empty nesting, they're always like, "Well, what are we gonna do now?" And I'm like, "Okay, fine. That's the right question, but you're asking it in the wrong way." It's more like you should be like, "Well, what are we gonna do now?
Or what
Now what
can
are we
we do
gonna
now?
what are
What
we gonna
can
do
we
now?"
do?
Like, that's
Yeah,
a we could do this, we could do that, like, that's the way to ask that question because, we don't know what we're gonna do, but we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna figure something out.
totally. All
Yeah.
right, well, let's back up because most of my listeners are not yet at that phase where you and I are at. But so I mentioned to you before that I see two main areas that are hard for parents and in
Mhm.
partnership together. I'm just going to say them both right now and then we'll go back and look at each of them. But
Sure.
one is when you and your partner don't agree about parenting styles.
Mhm.
Often I see one parent who wants to do peaceful parenting and the other one who wants to do conventional, more, fear based parenting. And the other is both of you are in theory on board with peaceful parenting, but one partner gets very reactive
Mhm.
when the kids are, being challenging and can't stay calm, and it seems to be just like a pattern that keeps repeating itself, and the other
Mhm.
partner just doesn't, they don't know what to do about it. So let's go back to how do you work with the parent or work with parents who are working with you and when they are really having some big disagreements philosophically about parenting.
Yeah, it's a fine question. I think there's sort of an easy answer that pops into my head almost all the time when people talk to me about they disagree about this, they disagree about that, and I guess maybe there's two. One is people disagree about a lot of stuff. Like we might turn on the television and there might be a football game against a team wearing red and a team wearing yellow. And you might prefer red and you might prefer yellow. And we disagree about who we want to win this football game, but we don't argue about it. There's not a conflict because we're not invested enough in that thing. And then maybe at the top, there's something like, I don't know, maybe there's a disagreement about monogamy or whether or not to have a baby. And there's so much investment that we can't regulate or we can't stay connected. And I think there's a line. There's a line between this thing at the top of the range and this thing at the bottom of the range. And somehow you have to figure out like where is the point where you go from I don't really care, might as well flip a coin, it's no big deal, to I I will die for this. Like what is that? And what is going on in that space? What's going on in that transition space between I don't care and I do care? There's something to be learned about that. And so therapeutically, I would spend a lot of time there just sort of asking about, okay, well, what do you mean when you say you don't disagree? And what are you on board with? And what aren't you on board with? And what are we talking about when you talk about we disagree? Where's that coming from for you? So there's a need to get beyond the binary. And it's important to do that in conversation. And sometimes that conversation can be several weeks or months or years long. And it doesn't have to be a conversation that we have Thursday night over dinner or in the one counseling session that we bring it up. But the other piece of that is like, who am I having this conversation with? My friend, my lover, my partner, or my antagonist, the person I must defeat on the battlefield of opinion? And so if you ask me what do I do, the first thing I do is try to get really curious about what exactly are we talking about? What do you disagree with? What are you on board with and why? Because there's gold there. And there's also gold in this idea of like what is the variable that switches you from I don't really care to I care so much. Like there's something in that space that needs your curiosity and needs your attention.
Do you so when parents do have this conversation, how would you suggest, like, say they're not clients of yours, like, how would you suggest that they have this conversation?
Well, if they can't have it
Counseling.
by themselves, they should get some help. From you or from a therapist or from someone who can navigate this. If they can have it by themselves because they feel emotionally intelligent, they feel regulated, and they feel hopeful, then there's maybe a couple things that I would recommend. And the first one would be something like, why don't you start with what you definitely do have in common? Like we want to raise healthy kids, or we want to raise emotionally intelligent kids. My wife and I have been saying for, I don't know, about half a decade, about 5, 6 years, that our parenting goal is to raise kids that we want to hang out with as adults. Like we want to be friends with our adult children. And so we don't key on peaceful versus not peaceful or, you know, smart versus not smarter, whatever the layers are. We're like, okay, is this going to help us stay friendly with our children? Right. And so then we filter down from there. So what do you agree on? And if you can start with what you do agree on, then, it's almost like having like, we're really clear about our mission. And then from mission goes tactics, right? So if I'm just talking to somebody in the wind about how do they navigate difference, I think you start with what is it that you really agree on? And I think you find that it's pretty easy to find things that you agree on if you raise the altitude, you know, because we can all agree we want to not kill our kids. Do you
That's
know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's pretty high altitude, but like even if you need to start there, then what? We don't want them to be unhealthy. We don't want them to be unsafe. I mean, you can come down until you get to, oh, but we're a little confused on how to do that. Now we need to talk tactics and what is that about? And sometimes when if you do start, we're pretty sure we don't want to kill our kids. And then you go to, we're sure we want our kids to feel safe. It's not that far to go, oh, peace is a value that we hold. And how do we keep peace? Now we're having a different conversation about what we do and don't agree on.
Yeah, that makes sense. What if you get to that point and I guess you maybe haven't gotten to that point if this is still an issue, but one thing I hear a lot is like, parents will have a disagreement about just philosophical things that it's hard to agree. Like they both think that this is the best case scenario for the kids. Like say, you agree that you want to be friends with your kids and then you have one parent who's like, well, I have a great relationship with my parent and I still was like afraid of him growing up. And I think it's fine for kids to be afraid of their parents, and the other parent strongly believes I'm just making up that as an example.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
other
yeah.
parent strongly believes, "Well, I don't think it's okay for kids to be afraid of their parents, even if you have a good relationship with your dad now." Is there a way that you see couples able to progress and with still having 2 fundamentally different beliefs like that?
Well, I mean, again, I would just sort of wonder, like, maybe they're not saying something different. I mean, there is something called healthy fear. I mean, you should be afraid of certain things. You should be afraid of, heights. I guess if you're walking on what I mean? Like, I don't need it. You should be afraid of wild animals in the safari if you're not protected. I don't think that should be your parents, but there is a thing called healthy fear that you learn about boundaries and you learn about what's there. And if you should be afraid of your parents includes something like violence is okay, then I would go, what are you talking about? If you should be afraid of your parents includes they should have boundaries and consequences. I'm like, yeah, they should have boundaries and consequences. And I think you can honor the desire to have, let's say, healthy fear and also peaceful parenting in that space, as long as maybe that's your target, and if that's your target, great. Now we figured out how do we execute on that target. But I think, I don't know, when you talk about philosophically, I think kids should do this or kids should do that. I the like kind of the philosopher in me, I guess, if it's philosophical, wants to actually have that conversation. Well, why should they do that? And then I also think that should is made up. Like should is like, where does should come from? Is it who says you should? Your parents? John Gottman? The Bible? Something you saw on TV one time? Like where does should come from? Because that also needs evaluation. And ultimately, I think should is about us, where it comes from us. And we are two people trying to, I mean, in general, we're two people trying to raise this nuclear family anyway. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's where my
Well,
brain goes.
yeah, no, I mean, what you kind of bringing up further questions. Say I had someone bringing me that challenge of,
Hmm.
my partner thinks that it's okay for kids to be a little bit of be afraid of him. And, we're not talking about physical violence,
Yeah.
but just, what we don't want to cross dad because he can get really harsh or whatever.
Hmm.
And I would say, well, they'll have a different kind of relationship with that partner than
Hmm.
they will with you. And that as long as nobody's being harmed, then it's
Hmm.
something you can agree to disagree on. And each have you have your own type of relationship with a parent. Do you think that's sustainable?
I mean, I think everything is sustainable if you got two functional adults at the table. I mean, if you got two people who are fundamentally different, and those differences aren't, you know, diametrically opposed to one another, then I think, my each of my kids has a different relationship with each of their parents. So there's almost four dynamics in play. There's not one dynamic between parents and children, And so we talk about lanes a lot, and we also carry different responsibility for each kid based on how well we know them or how well we understand the topic area, I mean, so, I think this idea of fear, again, there's something about healthy fear. I work in a methodology called relational life therapy, which was written by a guy named Terry Real. And Terry says, because you just use this word, and I think this is where the meat of it is, there is nothing that harshness can do that loving kindness can't do better.
I've heard him say that.
So,
I love that.
so like harsh fear is okay, like fear is reasonable because boundaries are real, and you need to learn like that if you touch a oven, that it's going to burn your finger. Like you should be afraid of a hot oven, but harshness is a totally different thing, And I think you can instill healthy fear. I don't know if I even like the
Okay, so
word,
let's
but like
let's use
there's a
that what Terry says. What if your partner does not believe that loving kindness can do what I forget exactly how he phrased it. What
harshness that nothing. There's nothing harshness can do that loving kindness can't do better.
Okay, so what if your partner disagrees with that?
I would ask them exactly what they disagree with. Like, what do you disagree with about that? Like, what story do you have about how harshness was more effective than loving kindness? And where does that come from for you? And is that really a healthy story for you? Do you really cherish that story? Or is it just one that you absorbed and took into yourself because it was all you knew, And in a lot of cases, it is all people know. I mean, in particular, I mean, I think it's less so now even than it was when I started my career 20 years ago, but, you know, we I was raised but I'm 52. I was raised by a generation of people who did not concentrate on relationality. There was no therapy as normal or, easy access to community groups that were focused on peaceful parenting. There was none of that. Everybody was making it up.
Yeah.
And they were making it up by what they learned from their parents, who were making it up from what they learned from their parents. There was no extra context. So I think people who are sort of convinced that this is the way because they inherited it from their parents, I'm like, why is it the way? And isn't there another way? And do you really believe in harshness as a strategy? And I don't think most people do. And that comes down to while they may celebrate that they're fine, my parents were harsh and I'm fine. It's really hard to build a compelling argument for harshness.
Yeah.
But I think you have to do that within the context, like in the larger context. And that's why I said a little bit earlier today in this, I think after we pressed record, I think if you're going to be in a parenting conversation, it's probably a 20-year conversation. It is not a single conversation that we have in the kitchen after a single incident. It is an exploratory, expansive thing. Cause you and I both know the second you crack the code on parenting, the game changes. Like and so that's why you have to start with values at the top. And
So what do
again,
we
as
both want for our kids? What do we want for
yeah, or what
with
do we
our
want for
relationship?
ourselves? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I like hanging out with my parents. They're fine. They're actually in town right now, but we're not friends. We're not tight. We enjoy each other, but I want to have an intimate relationship with my kids, which means what do I have to do that my parents didn't do? Give me language, give me freedom, give me the opportunity to fail. I've told my kids many times that I think they need to apologize. Here's a good one around fear, like perhaps, or I said, yeah, I think you need to apologize because you need the experience of being forgiven. You need the experience of having repair. You need the experience of seeing that you can screw up and also make it right again. Like if you never learn that, then you're not going to risk, you're not going to be, there's no way to be egalitarian with anyone because you're just going to be trying to make sure that you maintain the upper hand. So it's a balance for sure.
Well, I imagine your kids saw you doing repair and apologizing where you probably didn't see your parents doing that.
I mean, yeah, I mean, and even people who are like, my parents never fought. There was no conflict in my house. I go, oh, so there was no repair in your house. So even peace isn't necessarily the goal. I think repair is the goal because that's how you build trust. You build trust by again, this is Terry's language, but he talks about harmony, disharmony, repair. You have harmony, you can have peace, and then there is going to be disharmony. Kids are going to screw up. Somebody's going to get diagnosed with cancer. COVID is going to happen and lock your whole house down for 3 years or whatever. Like disharmony is going to happen. So now, are we about repair? Are we about, you know, consequences? Or are we about accountability? If your goal is accountability, all right, well, we can play that game. It seems pretty hard to figure out what accountability means to whom and how, whether or not you satisfy it. But repair is pretty simple. Like, are we okay? We're okay. You okay? We're okay. We're okay. We're gonna be okay, right? Right. We're gonna be okay. All right. Well, let's do the next thing.
Let's take a quick break to hear about the Yoto player. Yoto is a new sponsor of our podcast. I only promote products that I really believe in, and Yoto is a great product. I wish they were around when my kids were growing up. Yoto is a screen-free audio player for kids. It uses physical cards to play stories, music, podcasts, and other audio content, encouraging independent listening and play. You can buy the cards for your favorite books, from the classics like Charlotte's Web or Roald Dahl, or newer books like Captain Underpants. You can also make your own cards of podcast stories or music from MP3 files. Yoto also creates original content like radio and podcasts for kids. The possibilities for listening are varied and endless. Yoto also features a nightlight, an okay to wait clock, and other functions like white noise and an alarm. It's not connected to the internet, so kids can't go where you don't want them to go, and no one is listening in on them. And did I mention it's screen free? I learned about Yoto from Corey. Here's what she says. The Yoto player is by far my favorite parenting tool that I've ever purchased, and I recommend them to everyone who has kids. They're an amazing screen-free audiobook player that have been an absolute lifesaver for teaching my kids to play independently. Both my kids carried their Yoto players around the house, listening to books while drawing, doing Lego, and even relaxing in their rooms before bed. We also take Yoto players everywhere with us: short or long car trips, sporting events, restaurants, and even doctor's appointments. On a recent vacation, their Yoto players got them through an 8-hour drive and were used every evening in our hotel to help my kids relax after very busy days. Yoto has an impressive and ever-growing collection of books you can buy and have absolutely helped inspire a love of reading in both my kids. Thanks for the first-hand recommendation, Corey. And I also just want to highlight that you don't have to buy their books. You can buy blank cards and record your own content. To learn more, visit reimaginepeacefulparenting.com/Yoto. That's reimaginepeacefulparenting.com/Yoto, YOTO. I hope you check them out, and I'm just so happy to have them on as a sponsor for the podcast. Let's get back to the podcast. One thing I talk with parents a lot about is, when they are in conflict over parenting approaches, is that often the one person who like wants the other person to change is often going at them with like, you're doing it wrong and that's not right and that's not the way you're supposed to do it, which puts the other person on the defensive. And they either have to be, if they don't have a good understanding of, you can be worthy and lovable and still make mistakes, it either puts them on the defensive of like, I'm not doing anything wrong and my approach is perfect, or they feel like they're a bad person, right? If they like take to heart what their partner has said. So I talk a lot about when you do want to talk about, something that you were hoping that you could do differently as parents, to lead with their point of view and empathy and acknowledging like, gee, must have been so hard for you when our child called you like the meanest parent in the world and you got really upset and like of course that hurts your feelings. And it's a lot of all of the same tools that I teach parents to use with their children, because the peaceful
Mhm.
parenting is really just like relationship approach. And is that something that you find that you see a lot in your work, is that sort of like attack and defense? And do you have any other strategies for helping people getting out of that mode?
Well, what I always say, it's sort of two different questions, right? Like, if we just sort of extend the last thing that we were talking about, I think what kids need is to see how repair works. And I just think repair is the goal of being in a healthy relationship, because there is going to be disrepair. So repair is the goal. And I think if you ask anyone in my family, any one of the four of us, like, what is our family good at? We're good at repair, including the two of us, the parents, because my wife and I, we disagree about a lot. We have very different personalities. We have very different, we were raised in very different environments, and we're way more similar now than we used to be, because we've got almost 30 years in this role versus that we were children raised by our own parents' role. But I think, when if we go into a conversation about a disagreement we have on parenting, number one, we've learned to be really careful, careful, because we know sometimes it's a hot button. We know that it's hard, and one or both of us is prone to get triggered or get, you know, agitated by the other one's point of view. And so we are careful about that. We acknowledge that. And you can't stop being triggered. Like, you're not going to stop the experience of going, I don't like this and my body doesn't feel safe. And now I want to like protect myself with, classically it's fight, flight, or fix, right? Like, now I want to protect myself. So I think what we are both hyper committed to as human being individuals is kind of the art of self-regulation, like just making sure that we set ourselves up for success. Like, if I have to have a challenging conversation with Rebecca about one of our kids, I will say something like, "Hey, I got to have a challenging conversation with you about one of our kids. Is now a good time? Should we wait till they're gone? Is there like what's going, And she'll say, "No, now's not a good time, but let's do it in the morning because Mary's about to come home right now and that'll interrupt us." So there's a little bit of like ninja zen varsity level, like pre-work that you can do to protect
Mhm.
yourself. But in the moment, I think if one or both of you kind of spins out, this is where it's really fun to imagine tactics if you're clear about what your mission is. If you're clear that your mission is, we don't want to escalate in front of our kids, for example, you can imagine lots of tactics. Like, it could even be as simple as Rochambeau. You go, hey, all right, fine. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Somebody wins, and you go, okay, I'm going to go to the bathroom. And the other one just takes over. When we were trying to get our kids to eat food, which was a challenge across the board, and one of our kids might say something like, do I have to eat the rest of these peas? We understood that like the first person to answer was the primary parent. Like, so if I said, no, you don't have to eat them, and Rebecca really wanted them to eat the peas, she could either go to war with me and them and try to get them to eat the peas, or she could be like, well,
Guess we're
I
not eating
guess
the
to
peas
I
tonight.
guess tonight you don't have to eat the peas,
Yeah,
you know?
I love
Um,
that.
so, because we were more interested in maintaining peace at the dinner table than we were at advocating for our vegetable philosophy
Right. Again,
in
like
front of our
what's
children.
the big goal here? And for
Yeah.
you, keeping peace at the having dinner be like a warm experience and keeping peace at the dinner table.
But I'm really clear about it, whether we're talking about parenting or anything else, and this is about a year old for me, maybe a little bit longer, but I'm really, really clear that the best thing you can do for your relationship and for your kids is take care of your own stuff. Like, take care of your own stuff. Don't outsource your ability to feel okay to your partner or to your kids or to the weather or to whether or not whether or not the Seahawks win this Sunday. Like, don't outsource it, because if you do, you are constantly at the mercy of whatever they decide. And what's even more problematic is when you outsource your ability to feel okay to your own parents. Like, and I'm only okay if I do what they did or if I do the opposite of what they did. No, do what's best for you and for your, sense of being a functional adult on the planet. That's your job, you know?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit to say you are on, you both agree in principle about the importance of self-regulation, staying calm with
Yeah.
kids, but then one parent gets pretty easily triggered and starts screaming and yelling at the kids on a fairly regular basis. And then, they feel bad, but it they don't seem to be able to stop. How
Mhm.
would you help parents in that sort of situation?
Do they wanna stop?
They wanna stop, but in the moment, they don't wanna stop. That's what I see the most often is, like, they say, like, "Oh," later they like, "Yeah, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that," but when they're in the
Yeah.
moment and I have a lot of clients who say, well, I'll say, like, "Go take a break," like, "We've
Mhm.
agreed that I will take over when they're triggered," but then they won't leave, right? They, like,
Yeah.
stay and they're like, "No, he's gotta blah, blah, blah," and, like, so it's an in the moment problem
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that later they're like, I can't believe I didn't let you tap me out." But, like, in the moment, and then they feel like if their partner even if they've agreed, if their partner says, like, "Honey, you're a little triggered right now, take a break." "No, I'm not." Right? And then they get
Mhm.
mad at the partner even if they've agreed that this is such a common thing. I can think of 5 couples I work with
Mhm.
right now who have
Yeah.
that issue.
Well, I think the reason I asked, do they wanna stop? If they wanna stop, they can. It just takes practice. And literally what I mean. You have to practice. Take small if you were practicing guitar, you wouldn't expect to play, Stairway to Heaven the day you picked up the guitar or the day you decided that you want it. You would have to learn how to play some chords. And when you're honest about that and you're excruciatingly making your fingers go into these like really awkward positions on the fretboard, but then you strum it and it goes "Pring," and you get that sound. Then you can go, okay, I did it. And it's not mastering the entire moment. It's mastering the little triggers. I think, where I practice most often, the place I most often practice is in the car. When somebody cuts me off, I know that my body goes, jerk, you know, but then I go, wait a second, that's not who I want to be. And anger isn't my choice. And maybe that guy has something else going on. And oh, listen to this song that's on the radio, and maybe if I took my foot off the gas pedal, I would realize that life isn't such a hurry, and I literally practice all the time just in the car trying to not listen to the first thing that bubbles up inside of me. And so for your clients who want to get better at this, if they're honest, then we figure out how to invite them to actually practice. Tell their kids they're trying to practice. Dad's trying to practice this. Mom's trying to practice this. This whole thing about, like, I can't believe that I didn't let you tap me out. I mean, that's the equivalent of watching game film after after the football game. Like, you could look at, "Oh, yep, I dropped I forgot the block there, and that's why that happened, and everything broke down from that moment." From the moment I forgot to eat a sandwich for lunch, because I was too hungry or from that moment when I forgot this is a big one, but when I forgot to deal with my unresolved trauma from my dad, like, or whatever. I mean, but there's something bigger than the moment that needs attention, and you gotta practice, and maybe you need to drink more water or drink less alcohol, or maybe you need to maybe you need time to practice. I mean, I think the other thing too, and I think either I made this up or I heard you say it, but sometimes it's like him who loses his cool while she is directing traffic around, like, the desire to be peaceful. And the thing that happens a lot in most traditional setups is she gets a lot of practice. She gets a lot of practice without him around. In a traditional setup, she's usually practicing and he's probably at work and he comes home and his all of his practice is under her watchful eye. So, but you're doing it wrong. And no, not like that. And hold on a second, like maybe he needs some practice without her. And, if it's not a heterosexual marriage, fine. And if it's not gender specific for your relationship, fine.
Well, you could just talk about the primary parent
But
versus the
whomever,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like maybe you need to tap out for a while and let that other parent practice without you. Learn some stuff. Have the actual consequences from the actual kid versus from the parent who's trying to parent them too now. But if they don't want to get better at it, then there's no chance. Like if they don't want to get better, it doesn't like you can't make somebody believe or do something that they don't believe in. It's
Well, okay, if they don't wanna get better right now, are there any
yeah,
I hate to go at this the like, how do you change their mind? But honestly, that's what I mean. Like, how do you change their mind? Like, is that a terrible goal? But, like, I do think that that can be really damaging for children to grow up being, like, screamed and yelled at for normal childhood things. And,
yeah,
do you
yeah.
leave your partner because they don't wanna get better? Do you find some way to try to convince them? Like
Yeah, you're asking a question about leverage,
Mhm.
right? Y If you don't change the way you parent, then I'm going to divorce you is a pretty incredible amount of leverage, and it's real leverage. A lot of people don't follow through. Sometimes it's an empty threat or whatever, but, like, if they don't change and your kids aren't safe and I'm gonna leave, that's called leverage. And so part of it is if you don't wanna go that extreme, you can search for other forms of leverage, like, I'm just not gonna I mean, the list is a million miles long, right? I'm gonna not leave you alone with the kids. I'm not gonna go out in public with you. I'm not gonna do your laundry anymore. I'm not going to I'm gonna be sad all the time. I mean, if that's what you want, if you're so committed to your way of being on the planet, I need to let you have the natural consequences of that. And that is, anything from I'm gonna be sad and I'm gonna be hyper vigilant about protecting our kids is a consequence. And if it's not a big enough one, then you gotta come up with a bigger one. And that's and by the way, there's also, positive leverage. If you practice, then I'll buy you a popsicle or I'll take you out to dinner.
Yeah.
That's positive leverage.
Mhm, mhm.
But if you have no leverage, then you have to make other choices about, you know, whether or not you're gonna stay in the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem is often, that wouldn't I don't think that would be seen by courts as, that that person shouldn't be alone with the kids, and then if you do
Right.
split up,
Yeah.
then they're alone with the kids without you
Yeah.
there as a
Totally.
modifying factor.
Totally. And I wonder though too, like, you've heard this a million times, I'm sure. Where and again, I don't mean to, like, dog on him, but, like, he says, "Look, when you're not around, we're fine. When you're not here, we all get along, the kids behave, I don't lose my temper." So, that may or may not be true, who knows? But I can see where it could be true because sometimes the strain comes from the strain between the 2 of them
100%. It took
and
me
the
about
reality they're not treating each other like functional adults,
well,
you
it
know?
took me about 15 years to realize that actually, if I just left my husband alone and let him work out his own solution with the kids, it went much better than if I tried to, like, intervene and
There's the answer to your
quote,
question.
"help."
Yeah, and there's the answer to your question.
Yeah. Okay, well, I don't is there anything else you wanna add that I haven't asked you about in terms of, helping parents and partners be working together in a more harmonious, loving way?
No, I think that I mean, this has been really fun. Like, it's actually made me think about, like, "Oh, how do I keep doing this with my own kids and my own partner?" Because, again, a great way to not be friends with your adult children is to make them afraid of you. That's a great way. I mean, again, and I think that's different than healthy fear. Like, we have a responsibility to teach our kids about boundaries that or else they won't have any, and that's pro and
Well, you can teach I
we're
mean, the whole thing with peaceful parenting is you can teach boundaries without fear. right? Like you can
Yeah.
teach them by teaching them instead of making them afraid to cross you or whatever. And, I think what starts as small kids being afraid is just older kids being distant,
Mm.
which is,
Mhm.
I'm done with that person. They're
Yeah.
not treating me well and I'm
Yeah.
not afraid of them anymore, but I don't really want to be around them.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the answers to like, how do I raise kids who want to hang out with me when they're older is honestly through this kind of parenting is what I always tell people. My kids, I told you before we started that my sons have moved out who are 21 and 24. And
Mhm.
last week that my 3 kids went with me to Vermont for a week to visit my family. And I was so
Cool.
like,
Yeah.
felt so lucky that my 24-year-old and 21-year-old both wanted to take a week out of work to go away with their mom,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
it's pretty special.
I love that for you. Yeah,
Hmm.
cool.
Yeah, and I think that it's, this what you're talking about, keeping the goal as raising kids who you wanna hang out with and they wanna hang out with you is a really good one to, like, keep. Would I wanna hang out with somebody who treated me like this? Probably not. How can I treat them to in a way that makes them wanna hang out with me is a great what's the word? I'll just say ruler, that's not the word I mean, but
Yeah.
go on.
Like barometer or something.
Barometer, that's the word I was looking for, thank you.
Yeah.
You're obviously not in perimenopause.
Yeah. That's funny.
Well, thank you so much. Where's the best place for people to go and find out more about you and what you do?
The internet. I mean, my name is Zach Brittle, ZachBrittle. So the internet is me. I have a podcast that comes out every week. It's called Marriage Therapy Radio, and I interview couples there. So it's my goal to let the world have the same advantage I have, which is I talk to a lot of couples all the time about what makes relationships work and not work. And so I'm like, maybe if other people could hear from other couples. So
That's awesome.
that's so marriagetherapyradio.com or zachbrittle.com is my private practice. And that's the easiest place to find me.
Okay, great. And we'll put those links in the show notes. Do you only see folks in Washington or do you see anyone outside of Washington? Or are you in
Um,
person or virtual or how do you? I know people
I
are
do
going
a
to be
little bit of both.
listening and be
I
like, I
do a
want
little
to
bit of
work with this
both.
guy.
Yeah, I do a little bit of both. It kind of depends on if we can make it work with the schedule and the kind of the situation. It's sort of the Wild West out there when it comes to being able to help people, as you know. So
Yeah, yeah.
the best thing to do is ask. And
Okay,
if I can't help, then I'll try and point you in a good direction.
cool. Well, thank you so much. And before I let you go, I almost forgot the question I ask all my guests, which
Uh-oh.
is
So
if
I'm nervous.
you could go back in time to your younger parent self, what
Mhm.
advice would you give yourself?
I'm already a parent.
To your
Like,
younger
you
yeah.
mean
No, yeah. Like, you're brand new
I
starting out
am a
on this
parent? Yeah.
journey. What do you need to
Um,
hear that you know now that you didn't know then?
I mean, it's kind of a cliche. I think but it's like, it's relax, just relax. Like, it's the idea that somehow, I always put it this way, 100% of my clients have problems with their parents. So the idea that somehow I need to get it exactly right is a myth, and it's a it's a moving target that you can't hit. So just relax, like just take it easy, play the long game, and try and parent so that you can be in a healthy relationship with your adult children. That's what I've come to.
Nice. Thank you, Zach.
Yeah, yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.